In 1876, King Leopold II of Belgium gave Henry Morton Stanley a mission. Henry Morton Stanley was to go to Africa and conduct research on the dark continent. The king, he wanted to civilize Africa. And so, in 1878, something else happened. The king started the colonization process. His target was the Congo. French intelligence discovered the king's plan. Therefore, France quickly engaged in its own colonial exploration. 140 years later, in 2018, the United States, the Washington Times had an interesting headline, and this is what it said: "The future is African, and the United States is not prepared." So today I ask, what about France? Is France preparing for the colonization of Africa 2.0? That is my question. Welcome to Nahashon Kimeme Live. French President Emmanuel Macron arrives in Nairobi, Kenya today. He will be the first sitting president to ever visit Kenya in the history of our republic. Why? Is it a scramble for Africa? Or have they just discovered that Kenya is around? Thank you to everyone who suggests topics for my videos. I appreciate it. Suggest a topic, comment below, or send me an inbox. Thank you to all my 1,143 subscribers. Please subscribe to my channel and share these videos. Do not hide a light where there is darkness. You can ask questions during the live show. Please ask a question by commenting below. So let us begin. Who is Emmanuel Macron? This guy. His full name is Emmanuel Jean Michel Frederic Macron. Hope I pronounced it correctly. He often is referred to as Emmanuel Macron. He was born on 21st December 1977. He was born to Jean-Michel Macron, a professor of neurology, and Francois Ngousset, a physician. So you can see the son of a professor of neurology and the son of a physician. Pretty well off, a good point to start from in life. And he was not alone. He had a sister, and he has a sister. Her name is Estelle Macron. And then he has a brother, Laurent Macron. So that's the family of Emmanuel Macron. Let's get back to him. He studied philosophy at one of the most prestigious universities in Paris. He got a master's degree in public affairs from a French institute that mostly caters to the elites. He studied administration from a government administration school in France, something like the Kenya Institute of Administration in Kenya, or I think the Kenya Institute of Government. I'm not sure about the name, but something of that sort. So a good background, very good. Prestigious universities, very good. And then moves into the public sector. In 2004, he started working as a senior civil servant in the Inspectorate General of Finances. More specifically, he was the Inspector of Finances. He was just 27 years old, a full inspector, senior civil servant. This inspectorate where he worked was under the finance ministry in France. That was Macron, and that's his journey into public life. So he got into public life, and in 2008, guess what? Macron paid Kenya shillings 5.66 million to buy himself out of the government contract at the Ministry of Finance in France. How many Kenyans pay to get themselves into government as opposed to paying to get themselves out of government? This is France, not Kenya. So he became an investment banker, and he got a highly paying position at Rothschild and C Bank, right? The Rothschilds are a big deal. At the back, you can see the coat of arms given to one of the branches of the Rothschilds, right? By the King of Austria from back in the day. So he went to work for the Rothschild and C Bank, highly paying position. And then the Rothschild, as many of you all know, their associations with the banking sector it's pretty big. And yes, this particular bank was owned by the French and British branches of the Rothschild family. So he was working for the Rothschilds by the time he was 31 years old. Guys who know might know why I have put that in the background. Between 2009 and 2013, Macron earned Kenya shillings 340 million as he worked at that Rothschild bank. He left that bank in 2012 and he was appointed back into the public sector by the president for Holland in May 2012. He was appointed as the Deputy Secretary General to the President, Holland. So he was appointed again Minister of Economy, Industry and Digital Affairs in August 2014. So this guy is moving from good to better to better, right? To best. He resigned in August 2018. Why did he resign? Because it seems things have been going well. Well, he resigned to launch a bid in the 2017 presidential election. That was a gamble, and guess what? Macron won. He became the president of France in 2017 after 2 rounds of voting. So he got 24% of the overall vote in April 2017. That was the first round, just 24%, a small number. But in the second round of voting, he got 66.1% of the vote. That was in May 2017, just a month later. At that time, Macron was 39 years old. Today, Macron is 41 years old. Uhuru Kenyatta is 57 years old. So if Uhuru is too young to retire, what about Macron? So he is now president of France, but how is he doing as the French president? Well, there was an Ipsos poll between 1st and 2nd March 2019. And guess what the poll said? 67% of the French public disapproved of Macron's presidency. They did not like the guy. They were disappointed in him. What was the problem? What did he do? To answer those questions, we must move into the politics of Emmanuel Macron. We have seen his rise. We have seen his move to government, to the private sector, and back to government. So now let's check his politics. When he was a youth, Macron worked for the Citizen and Republican movement for 2 years. This movement, Citizen and Republican, it does not like the European Union at all. Still, it's a leftist outfit. And you know what leftists are, right? They're mostly socialists, people who believe that we should come together, pool our resources together, give it to the government, and then the government can provide equity for everyone. Everyone can have education, everyone can have healthcare, everyone can have a job, everyone can have money if they don't have a job, and we all live perfectly. It has never worked, but still people push that economic idea. And Macron was one of them. So he didn't join this party because he didn't like the fact that they did not like the EU. So he became a member of the Socialist Party when he was 24 years old. He renewed his subscription to the party from 2006 to 2009. In August 2015, Macron said he was no longer a member of the Socialist Party. He was now an independent. So he founded a centrist political movement in April 2016. The name of the movement was En Marche. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It means on the move. And then the party renamed itself in 2017 and called itself Le République En Marche. I'll say it in English because I'm not a Frenchman. It means the Republic on the move. And perhaps that is his idea, to keep France on the move. But he had a challenger, as most presidential candidates do. And the challenger was Marine Le Pen. And she was head of the National Rally Party. The National Rally Party is a right-wing party, right? Right-wing parties are mostly conservatives, people who prefer the old order, traditionalists. In the West, they are mostly associated with racism or those other things because they don't like these cultures, what they are bringing into their countries. They want to preserve the old cultures. And that's why many people equate them with racism, right? And also they do that just to beat them down, right? So in this party, Marine Le Pen did a lot of things like pushing out the extremists from her party, trying to nationalize their National Rally Party. And she secured 21.3% of the vote against Macron in the first round. That means Macron beat her by a paltry 2.7%. She was a formidable force. And just remember, Britain had voted to leave the EU on 23rd June 2016. The right wing had won in Britain. Trump had won in November 2016. The right wing had won in America. And now Le Pen was a formidable force and she had a chance of winning in France. The left was scared. It was scared out of its wits. And so what happened? All the global leftists, they came together. The European Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and former President of the US, Barack Obama, they all came and supported Macron. Talk about interfering in another country's elections. They did so verbally, they did so I think by appearances, some of them, and they did so by, just pushing it as far as they could without seeming as though they are interfering with the elections. And they did not interfere directly. Guess what? The efforts of all the leftists, the fear that the National Rally Party was a racist party, and all of those things were able to give Macron a win. So Macron has won. And guess what? The real Macron is about to stand up. So let me start with this example, right? We all know, we all have a national anthem. The title of our national anthem is O God of all creation. E Mungu nguvu wetu. Well, the French have a national anthem of their own. It is called La Marseillaise or something. I'm not French again. So that was the national anthem. And a guy called Claude Jean Rouget de Laisselle wrote it in 1792, back in the day, after France had declared war on Austria. The French National Convention accepted it as the French national anthem on 14th July 1795. That was a long time ago. It was the first French anthem. And guess what? Macron did not play it during his victory speech. Other people, Macron did not ban it, but there are other people who had banned the French national anthem. The first one to ban it was Napoleon. Do not play that national anthem. And he banned it during the French Empire. Another person to ban it was Louis XVIII. and he banned it during the second restoration of the Bourbon monarchy. As you can see, the guys who are not very fond of the French anthem are dictators. And the first move that Macron did during his victory speech was not to play that anthem. What did he do? He played the EU anthem known as Ode to Joy. And guess who composed it? Beethoven. And guess the nationality of Beethoven? He was a German. So on the first day of victory, Macron put aside the French national anthem and he played an anthem of the European Union composed by a German and not even a Frenchman. What message was he sending to his Frenchman? Was the EU about to absorb France? Was that his plan? So that angered a lot of people. But then, let's go to the French National Congress, right? So the French National Congress is like a meeting of the two houses of the French Parliament, right? So 2 months after winning, Macron addresses the French Congress at the Château de Versailles, right? Louis XIV built this chateau. Macron got them together, this National Congress, he convened it, and he told the parliamentarians that he wanted to cut the number of lawmakers by 1/3, by 33%. And guess what? In the history of France, the French had banned a joint address to the both houses of parliament in 1873. That's way back in the day. And they did that to check the powers of the president, to promote the separation of the executive and the legislative. Recently, in 2008, France changed that constitution and it allowed the president to address a joint sitting of both houses, the French National Congress. Nicolas Sarkozy addressed a French Congress in June 2009, just once in his presidency. Francois Hollande, the guy who appointed Macron as deputy secretary in government, he did it, addressed the French National Congress in 2015, again just once. Macron did it in July 2017, and he planned to do it every year. And this, besides telling that he wants to cut the lawmakers by 1/3, this is what else he told them. I want deep reforms in our institutions, and they have to be done within a year. These reforms will go through parliament, but if necessary, I will put them to voters in a referendum. In other words, this thing will go through. Again, the youngest French leader since Napoleon Bonaparte seemed to have a mind of his own. Not a French national ideal, but an ideal that is yet to be communicated. So at a different forum, he said that he planned to rule France like a Roman god. So you can see where this young man is heading towards. This young man who grew with privilege is heading towards. This young man who went to elite schools, you can see where his head is at. And he said that he gave that example of Jupiter because Jupiter used to weigh his pronouncements before he said them. And he said that's what he will do. He won't be around talking to everybody like Francois Hollande, who did not do a good job of it. He will just weigh his pronouncements, make them rare, but make them effective, like the Roman god Jupiter. So back to what most people know, or what people have seen, the yellow vest protest, right? So what led to this yellow vest protest? Macron proposed the cutting of corporate tax from 33.3% to 25%. He supported the cutting the amount of civil servants by 120,000 people. That's a whole lot of savings. He supports spending cuts. For example, he said that he would cut 60 billion euros in public spending over 5 years. So Macron seemed to be the centrist that he was saying, the independent that he was saying, that he was not a socialist and he was not a right-winger. He was in the middle. And in this case, you can see policies that would appeal to the right wing and policies that should lead to growth, as they are doing under Trump in America. So what is the Yellow Vest movement? Why are things not moving so well? The Yellow Vest movement is motivated. They want to stop rising fuel prices. They want to stop the high cost of living. They are saying the tax reforms that Macron is speaking about, the reorganization of taxes, it's only to suit political agendas. It's not to help them. For example, diesel taxes increased by 14% over 1 year. Petrol taxes by 7.5%. Remember, these taxes on petroleum products, there are two kinds. There's domestic consumption tax on energy products. Like from 2014, this tax had a carbon component attached to it, a carbon tax. The reason for increase in fuel prices was mostly due to this tax, because it increased yearly, year after year. It's increasing, and it's increasing based on your consumption. And what the government wanted to do was to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels in France. So that was one, and that was the major one, especially that carbon component that increases every year. Then there was VAT, right? From it was at 19.6% from 2000 to 2014. Then it went to 20% from 2014, but it remained steady. So guys did not really have a problem with that. They had a problem with the one that increases every year, the carbon tax, which is under the domestic consumption tax, right? And as the people said, these tax cuts by Macron, they are all politics, because the reality on the ground is that the fuel taxes are increasing and inflation is increasing. Organized groups, they are benefiting from tax exemptions, all the cuts that Macron is talking about, but ordinary people are suffering from this carbon tax, and these are the ordinary people, and money collected from them goes to replace cash lost by tax cuts on the rich. So you're taxing the rich less, you're taxing the poor more. At the end of the day, you reach an equilibrium, but an equilibrium where the poor have suffered, the rich have prospered. And then the government implemented a decision to cut the speed limit on the country roads, the roads in the country, not in the cities, from 90 kilometers per hour to 80 kilometers per hour, despite opposition from ordinary people in the country. And they kind of felt, what's the matter with Macron? Why isn't he hearing our cry? There's a tax that is increasing yearly. There's a cut on speed limits, but all of these moves, they seem to be affecting us, and all the other moves, they seem to be benefiting other people. Isn't Macron listening? Again, in 2008, there was a law. Yes, all motorists are supposed to keep yellow vests in their car, and they're supposed to wear them in case of an emergency. And so that's why you see getting a yellow vest is not that much of a problem in France. And that's why people can actually, it can happen pretty quick and pretty fast, because it's mostly affecting the transport sector And in that sector, everybody has to have a yellow vest in France if you have a car. So that's why you can see the genesis of the yellow vest protest, right? And it's associated with the working class. It's highly visible, and it's widely understood as a distress signal. People are stressed. When your car is broken down, you are supposed to wear this vest and to warn other drivers of whatever, any problem, just to make yourself visible on the road, right? So this thing was now a visibility of their wars against Macron. He is not listening. This kid from an elite school is not listening. And then there's another thing. Macron stopped the influx of he wants to stop the influx of lowly paid temporary workers from Central and Eastern Europe. He doesn't want them in France, but at the same time, he wants an open door policy towards migrants from the Middle East and Africa. So why is he doing these kinds of things? He's cutting tax in one area, he's bringing taxes in another area, right? He's the French president, but he's supporting European policies, right? He's the one who he doesn't want low-paid workers from Central and Eastern Europe, but then he supports immigrants from Middle East and Africa. He's in the same line of thinking as Angela Merkel, and people can't understand it on the ground. So other notable instances when it comes to Macron. There was a Macron law to stop mass corruption in French politics. They would do that by banning elected representatives from hiring family members. No hiring of family members if you are in government. But then in August 2017, Macron wanted to hire his wife or to give her an official role in government. He wanted to make her a first lady. And from the French, that was a no-no. Because it seems that you're not understanding how badly we want to separate the state from, we want to limit the powers of government. And here you are, holding the French National Congress, and you want to hold it as many times as possible, despite us having banned it, now the French, that is, having banned it to encourage separation. And the previous presidents only have done it once, but you want to do it every year. You want to have a first lady. Why didn't the other presidents have it? So there's another notable incident, right? The Chief of General Staff of the armies stepped down on 19th July 2017. Macron had cut the military budget by 96 billion Kenya shillings. And the general would not have it. Because in the same year, China had increased its military budget by 771.86 billion Kenya shillings. So China is increasing by over 700 billion. Macron is decreasing the budget by close to 100 billion. And the general could not understand it, so he quit. And that was a big deal in France. Again, this guy seems to be doing things opposite of the way that other guys would want it done. But let's finish with that. Let's go to Emmanuel Macron and his view of Africa. France will not tell Africa what to do. That is what Macron was saying. He said, France no longer has an Africa policy. He said that he was from a generation that would not tell Africans what to do. That Africa had to develop its own future. Those were some of the words from Emmanuel Macron. But then guess what he does after uttering those words? He starts softly by mentioning our challenges, saying, the challenge of Africa is civilization. Remember, the King of Belgium wanted to come and civilize Africa, and after some time, he had conquered Africa. So Macron says the problem of Africa is civilization. And remember, the French had an assimilation policy in Africa to civilize us, to develop a culture within us, so that the African can become a cultured man as if he did not have his own culture. Again, Macron said that the challenge of Africa is what? Civilization. We are not civilized enough. But perhaps I'm being too hard on him. But he used that word. The problem of Africa is what? Civilization. So, after saying that he won't tell Africa what to do, he goes and tells Africa what to do. He starts from a very nice note. The future of Africa, of the African young, is not to leave Africa. And people might say, he's saying that because, he wants the people of Africa to develop Africa. Or perhaps he does not want African migrants in Europe. An open door policy, yes, but please do not come, develop over there, right? So anyway, he says that Africa can leapfrog the US and European technologies in energy and communications. And guess who are the guys who do most of the energy and communication? They're the young people. At the same time, Macron is calling for a slowdown in the growth of the African population. So who are these young people who would be able to leapfrog US and European technologies? Again, what Macron is saying, what he's doing, the policies, they do not have they are not coherent, and you cannot bank on them. So he said, present me with a woman who decided, being perfectly educated, to have 7, 8 or 9 children. He says, when countries, speaking about Africa, are having 7 or 8 children per woman, France and the other countries can decide to send billions of euros. But as long as those countries have 7 or 8 children per woman, they will never be stable. That is what Macron said. The problem is overpopulation. The problem is lack of civilization. We need to be civilized. We need to reduce our numbers. Telling us what we need to do. So he's speaking about our families. Macron is married to Brigitte Marie-Claude Macron. She was a French teacher. She taught French and Latin at a Jesuit high school in France. An elite high school. Again, always Macron, starting from the elite, always moving up in elite. And in high school, he was at an elite school, an elite Jesuit school. And that is where she met Macron. The wife was a teacher, Macron was a student. But still speaking about the family in Africa. The wife is 65 years old. Macron is 41 years old. But still speaking about the family in Africa. And even when he speaks of the family in Africa, even though we have questions about his own family, he is still wrong. Because in 2017, the fertility rate in sub-Saharan Africa was 4.85 children per woman. There is no 6 or 7 children per woman in Africa. So if that was the main problem according to him, then that is not a problem at all according to the statistics. It is something in his head. It is an elitist thought. Mostly born of a child who went through elitist schools throughout his life. And even in Kenya, we are even lower. We have 3.85 births per woman in Kenya. Far from the 7 to the 8 children that he was talking about. So now will he release the euros? The billions of euros? Because since we do not have 7 and 8, then the euros would work, wouldn't they? Let's go to the euros. There is something we call the currency trap. That's what I call it. And I think others call it. The West African CFA franc is used in West African countries, 8 West African countries. The Central African CFA franc is used in 6 Central African countries. both currencies are guaranteed by the French treasury. Currencies used in Africa, guaranteed by the French treasury in France. What is the problem with Africa? Although the two are separate, the West African and the Central African franc, they have always been at parity. That means that you can just exchange them. They both have a fixed exchange rate to the euro, which brings additional problems. What is the problem with Africans? The value of the CFA franc has been widely criticized as being high, favoring guess who? The urban elites of African countries. And guess what they buy? Imported manufactured goods, and they buy it cheaply. And guess which country they buy most of these goods from? France. What happens to the rest of the population? Those who are not elite. The farmers cannot access export products, export agricultural products. It's expensive for them to export. Some countries, they have wised up. Guinea, Mali, Madagascar, Mauritania, and 4 other territories in Africa, they left the CFA franc. But then there are other countries who think in certain ways, because Mali left the CFA franc and then it rejoined the CFA franc in 1984. Equatorial Guinea joins it in 1985. Guinea-Bissau joins it in 1987. Now, think about these countries, Mali, Equatorial Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau. What is happening in those countries? Are they stable? Everything that France touches seems to go bad. Look at Algeria today. What is happening there? And France is now in Kenya, and it wants to touch Kenya, right? So let's talk about Kenya a bit. So the Kenyan embassy in Paris, France, opened in 1966. Josephat Karanja was in charge of it, right? He was the first, he was in charge of it. That's when it opened in 1966. The first ambassador was appointed in 1970. His name was Henry Nzioka Muli. The embassy also deals with matters pertaining to Portugal, Serbia, and the Holy See. The Holy See is the Vatican. France has an embassy in Kenya as well. It's at Peponi Gardens off Peponi Road in Westlands, officially known as the Embassy of France to Kenya and Somalia. French institutions in Kenya are numerous. One of them, the Cooperation and Cultural Action Office. Remember, exporting its culture is a big deal to France. And one of the areas of cooperation that France is really focusing on is in the film industry in Kenya. Because film is one of the best ways of exporting your culture. And France knows what it is doing. So anyway, let me go to another institution, the French Development Agency. I'll mention it in just a bit. Business France in Kenya. That's for people wanting to do, Frenchmen wanting to do business in Kenya. The French Chamber of Commerce also for business, right? So we know a couple of those institutions that you might hear of when you go to the French embassy in Kenya. In 1998, France created a priority solidarity zone. Kenya was included in that zone in 1999. The zone has about 55 countries. The idea of the zone was to help France to focus its foreign aid in a limited number of countries. In 2004, France introduced a new tool to help it govern that foreign aid in those 55 countries in that zone. It was called the Framework Partnership Document. And it specifies a limited number of sectors where the money can go to. For example, the money for foreign aid in Kenya would mostly go to 2 or 3 sectors. And those 2 or 3 sectors would account for 80% of the aid to Kenya, of the French aid to Kenya. So in 2013, the French Development Agency, known as AFD, financed 10.5 billion Kenya shillings to connect the Kenya and Ethiopian power grid. In 2014, the French Development Agency financed 11.5 billion Kenya shillings project for the expansion of the Nairobi water system. And water is still a problem. Where did the cash from France go to? Anyway, both loans were soft loans. What do you mean by soft loans? Or concessional loans? I think that's the economic term. These are loans that have a 20 to 25 year period of maturity, or let's just say a long period of maturity. They have a grace period. In this case, they had a grace period of 7 years, and they also have a low interest rate, mostly below 4%. In this case, they had a loan, an interest rate of 2%. The loans were open to competitive bidding. That means that they do not have to, French companies do not have to be the beneficiaries of where the contracts are going to within those loans, right? In China, it's a totally different story. When it comes to the SGR, I think we're already paying for it, even though it's just completed just the other day. So the grace period was short, the period of maturity was short. Did you have a grace period? The interest rate is a bit high. So I was thinking, why don't we go mostly for the French loans? We know why the French are giving such nice terms, because they want inroads into Kenya, because we're not a former colony, right? They want inroads into Kenya, and they can get inroads through those loans. But still, we can take advantage of that instead of going for the Chinese loans. And they also allow for competitive bidding. That means we can go for the lowest, let's say, bidder, instead of, like in China, you have to go for Chinese companies. That increases their bargaining power, means that they can hike their prices. So why not go for the French? We know what they want to do to make inroads into Kenya, but at the same time, we can benefit from those moves in the short term instead of making China great again. So Kenya is the primary trading partner for France in East Africa is Kenya. We're the largest economy, and we're a gateway. French exports to Kenya in 2011 were worth 18.4 billion Kenya shillings. In 2012, French exports were worth 25.3 billion Kenyan shillings. That's an increase of 35%. So let's look at the other way around. Kenyan exports to France. So Kenyan exports to France were worth 9.3 billion in 2011 shillings. In 2012, Kenyan exports to France were 8.3 billion. That's a 12% decline. Why? French exports to Kenya are increasing. Kenyan exports to France are decreasing. Why? I hope that this was an anomaly between 2011 and 2012 only. Otherwise, it might still be some like the Cuba case, where we bring in more doctors from Cuba, send less doctors for training, and then we pay Cuban doctors a whole lot of money, but our Kenyan doctors in Cuba are suffering. In other words, we are making bad deals, worse than the Iran deal that the US made with Iran. So anyway, as of 2011, the French foreign direct investment was worth 21 billion into Kenya. Notable French firms in Kenya, they included Kenya Total and Air France, KLM. Total owns 15.9% of the petroleum sales in Kenya. Air France, KLM, owns 26% of Kenya Airways. So if Kenya Airways takes over JKIA, then France through then a French company, Air France KLM, will have stakes in our national airport premise. So other companies that are in Kenya include Lafarge. I think Lafarge, they combine with Holmesseal, and now we have Lafarge Holmesseal instead of Bamburi Cement, right? Because the takeover was a takeover of Bamburi. Lafarge is in Kenya, that's what I'm trying to say. Oriel is in Kenya, Michelin, Sagem, Alcatel, so many companies. There's a French school in Kenya, it's called Lycée Denis de Tourette. And then of course we all know Alliance Francaise. It's French, not owned by the French government, but it's France. So Macron declared in recent times that France is back. What did he mean by saying that France is back? Is it back to recolonize? Is it back to increase its influence? Isn't the CFA franc enough? Isn't the increase in trading in Kenya enough? How is it back? What does he mean by back? So he also said that the future of the world will be largely played out in Africa. And remember the Washington Times, what it said? That Africa, the future is African and the US is not prepared. So guys are starting to think about Africa. But they're not thinking of Africa as we think that they are thinking of us. Otto von Bismarck, how he thought of Africa, right, was that there is a continent and that we need to divide it. And that the powers that be need to decide on how they will divide it, increase their influence strategically in certain areas. And they started like Leopold did, with an aim of civilizing, like Macron feels that Africa is not yet civilized. They came with gifts. Some came with guns, others came with bottles, others came with gold, ornaments, machines. They came with so many kinds of things. Now they are coming with loads of money to give to us in terms of aid. And eventually they take so much from us, because that's the aim. Because the future is by taking away from Africa. And China is already way ahead of them. And they are now looking at it, and they want a piece of it. So that's what I had for you today. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the comment sections below the video. Thank you to all my 1,143 subscribers. Nawapenda wote. Please subscribe to my channel and share these videos. Do not hide a light where there is darkness. Pray for me that I may not flee for fear of the wolves.